welcome to episode 80. And because it's number 80, it's just me today. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about today, I guess a few things have happened in the last week or two that prompted me to think about being a copycat and remembering that probably 10 years ago, or maybe a little bit longer even, the longer back it is, the more it shows how much it affected me. Because the fact that I still think about it is that I had a friend, a very close friend, and she was going to be doing something, and I actually can't remember what the something is. I wish I could, because it would just add probably a little bit more flavor to this story. But she wanted to try something new, some kind of activity. And I said, oh, that sounds really cool. I want to do that. I want to try that. That sounds fun. And she immediately whipped her head and looked at me and said, you're such a copycat. You wouldn't have thought of that if I hadn't said something. So you really, I don't remember if she said you shouldn't do it. That was probably the voice in my head that said, oh yeah, Sarah, you're such a copycat. You wouldn't have thought of that if your friend hadn't suggested doing that activity. So you can't do it because you didn't think of it. And I think I actually really didn't do it. And in the years since, 10, 12, however many it's been, that really stuck with me. It really hurt my feelings. And now, though, I look back on it finally and I can say, hey, I am exactly that person who anytime somebody says, oh, I tried this or I saw that or read about this or I see something, read about something, I think, yeah, I want to try that. I want to try that. And I try lots of different things. And I am exactly the definition of a jack of all trades, or Jill of all trades, however that works. I'm going to go with Jack of all trades, where I like to try almost anything at least once or twice. So I did a crochet class a couple of weeks ago. I do drawing classes. I like to learn lots of different skills and try different activities. The one that's still on my list that I really want to make sure I don't forget to do is because I read a book about a woman who raised a hawk. And I'm trying to remember the name of that book. Damn. Okay, I'm going to have to put it in the notes because it's not coming to me. But there is a place about an hour or two away from me where you can learn how to, not a hawk, falcon, you can learn how to work with falcons. And I wanted to try that. So that is still on my list of things to try. Back to the story. I felt devastated after being told I was a copycat. Now I realize I am. I kind of have to own the fact that I'm a copycat. And then I was reading the journal, volume 1 of the Journals of Anselm Kiefer. I'm a bit obsessed. I've mentioned him a couple of times through this podcast. And Anselm Kiefer had a theme he painted by, which was based on this idea that for every star in the sky, there is a corresponding flower. And I read that in the journal, and I've seen that in his work. And I thought, wow, that's just such an incredible idea. What an incredible man. He came up with all these incredible ideas, incredible artist. What a genius, what an original. And he says directly in his journal that he got that idea from somebody, from a poet. And he works with it. And he's completely upfront. He's like, I took that idea and I work with that in my own paintings. And I thought, oh, he's a copycat. But not really, but he took the idea and he used it in a different kind of a way. And then I was listening to an interview of Anne Carson. It was somebody else that I've spoken about on this podcast a couple of times at least, I think. And she had written a book called H of H Playbook that I found by accident when I was looking for a book about Anselm Kiefer. That's a whole other story. And near the beginning of that interview, she talks about how she always wanted to be, when she was little, she wanted to be Oscar Wilde. And here's another person I'm like, wildly original, writer, translator, artist, makes these beautiful books, H of H Playbook. Another one called Knox that is a piece she created to honor her brother who had died. And there's lots of handwritten bits and homemade looking bits and incredibly beautifully written words. And she wanted to be somebody else when she was young. And again, that's sort of a form of copying. And so all of this is leading to the fact that a couple of weeks ago, I was participating in an information session to learn about a local playwrights workshop group here in Montreal. And one of the things that they do is work with people who want to adapt an existing play, an old play, and rewrite it, recreate it in different terms, which is what H of H Playbook is, Anne Carson's H of H Playbook. And so I thought, oh, why don't I copy that idea? As I was reminded through this information session with the playwrights workshop people. And I thought, oh, I could copy that idea, but I'll do something different. I don't know exactly what I'll do. And a couple of days ago, I was reading another one of Anne Carson's books, and I suddenly thought, oh, I know what I can do. I can take the Philosophical Investigations, which is a book written by Ludwig Wittgenstein. So I did study philosophy in school, and one of the philosophers who really captured me was Wittgenstein. And he had an interesting history because he started out with his Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, I think it was called, where he was very strict in his treatment of language. So it was very mathematical, really, logical, mathematical, kind of like Bertrand Russell in that tradition, that English tradition of understanding language in terms of its parts and pieces and considering speech almost like equations in a way, logical phrases and things. And then he evolved over time and wrote something else, the blue and the green, something, my memory is terrible today. In any case, he did write an intervening piece, and then he wrote Philosophical Investigations, where he's just completely gone off in a brand new direction, where language is a series of games. Language is conversations that we play as games. You can't just assign a specific concrete meaning to each word. Meanings arise from how we use words. We play with words. And he's writing it in Nietzsche style, aphoristic style, so where before his books were written in a more technical way, this book it's such a joy to read. I wrote my thesis on it. And I have never lost that joy that I felt when I was reading his book. So again, long story, try to bring this around. The idea came to me a couple of days ago that I could adapt the Philosophical Investigations as a play, though. So it's a philosophical piece, but I could write it as a play. And the main character is language, because the main character really of his work is language. And because he was German, I thought, well, what could I name the main character? And so I looked up what language is in German, and I don't really know how to pronounce this properly. I'll have to look it up, but Sprache, something like that. That's my main character. So all of that, really the idea behind today is just to reach out and ask what it means to you to create something original. What does that even mean? What does it mean to be a copycat? I was so hurt by that. And there's that saying, you spot it, you got it. So if it hurts you, you got to look at it a little bit. And I thought, well, I am a copycat. So it's what do I associate that with? What does that mean to me? Is that a terrible, bad thing to be? And I thought, well, no, I can't feel about it that way because I am. And lots of people are inspired, and that's really what we do. So we kind of hopscotch through different ideas and come up with something that's meaningful to us. And whether I call it original or not doesn't even really matter. But I would be curious to know what it means to be original, what it means that something reflects who you are, what it means for something that you make to have been inspired by someone else or the work of someone else or something you heard or something you saw or something you put together from a couple of different places. I would love to hear what you think about that. So thank you as always for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you.